Ilia Topuria is turning down fights and being a complete diva of a UFC champion. No, this isn't true. That's fake news. But last week, Joe Rogan claimed Ilia Topuria had turned down the Volkanovski rematch. This caused some backlash against Ilia Topuria throughout social media, him being called Ilia Topuria, and the narrative being that Topuria was saying no to matchups inside of the UFC featherweight division. Now, the truth be told, this wasn't actually the case. There was a clip that emerged of Ilia Topuria. It was him doing a podcast in Spanish, and it was kind of pushed that he had been saying he would prefer to fight Brian Ortega as opposed to either a Volkanovski rematch or Max Holloway. This isn't exactly the case, and some things were lost in translation. During today's video, I'm going to go back, watch, and disprove Joe Rogan's statement where he said Topuria was ducking the fight and turned down the Volkanovski rematch, as well as Daniel Cormier, who just piggybacked those claims and added a little more fuel to the fire in a recent video. And we're also going to look at the evidence that was dropped by Alexander Volkanovski in a recent interview about the supposed offered matchup, and also show the Topuria clip where he talked about his willingness to take on Max Holloway or Alexander Volkanovski next, and his recent tweet where he stated exactly what he wanted. Guys, make sure you smash the like button. If you're new, subscribe. We're going to first jump right on to the Joe Rogan clip. Unfortunately, Joe Rogan has not become the most trusted name in MMA news, especially with false statements put out like this, which a week later are disproved. Now, he did the Joe Rogan Experience MMA show with the great Max Holloway, and this is what he said.
Who he wants to fight next, but I mean, I guess he feels like he's the champ, he can call the shots. But I know that he turned down the Perth one, the 305, the Volkanovski rematch.
Oh, yeah.
That's a hot take right there. That's a bold claim. We're thinking he turned it down. And seeing this initially, everybody believed it. I mean, Joe Rogan, obviously UFC commentator, UFC face of the fans at one point, currently has kind of drifted away from, being a fan favorite as far as UFC faces go, because some will claim he's a bit of a casual. Now, this statement here, I would assume, came with some fake inside information, but Joe Rogan's got the biggest podcast on the planet. So in a sense, he's given a bad name to Ilia Topuria and doing damage to his image, now putting out that Topuria is a fight ducker, which is just not true. Of course, the great Daniel Cormier had to do a video on the same topic, backing the claims of Rogan, but then adding some fuel, which I think he just made up out of thin air.
Taking another approach. I don't know exactly what it is, though, because he said he wasn't going to fight Brian Ortega. He said he wasn't going to fight Max Holloway. And now it sounds like he's not wanting to fight Alexander Volkanovski again.
None of those things he said was true. He had mentioned being interested in a fight against Brian Ortega, wanting to fight Max Holloway with the stipulation that there's going to be a BMF belt on the line. And of course, he'd be willing to fight Volkanovski again, but he would prefer it to be in Spain on his timetable. And I think that there's no surprise that Ilia Topuria might be looking at other options outside of a Volkanovski who had 2 back-to-back knockout losses. Like, there's going to need to be a time window of rest and recovery for Volkanovski. One would at the least assume, or maybe Volk's just crazy enough to jump right in as soon as possible, take on Topuria again, and 2 knockout losses in a row. They don't matter to Volkanovski. The chin's solid forever. I don't think that would be his best interest, and that's obviously not true, because we're going to bring up Alexander Volkanovski, who talked about Joe Rogan's recent clip.
Joe Rogan on his podcast announced that Ilia Topuria allegedly refused the rematch for you in Perth. But was that fight ever even a possibility happening that soon?
Well, obviously I've made it pretty clear that I wanted to wait a bit towards the end of the year. I know that he's in.
He wanted to wait a bit towards the end of the year. He's already essentially denied that that fight was offered to him. Or maybe he's the one that said no to Topuria.
End of the year, but I was looking maybe that a little bit later.
But yeah, with obviously questions were asked about, what was I going to fight on the Perth card? A lot of media were saying, thinking obviously I went over there and I was the face of the event when I went over there and did the announcement. So I'm guessing a lot of people thought I was going to be on there, so he was even getting asked questions about it. So he did the interview. I reckon that's where Joe Rogan got this. Whether he got inside information, I don't know.
Where he was like, why would I go to enemy territory and fight someone I'm the champ, and he was saying things like that. So whether that's what Joe Rogan was going off, or he's got inside information. But nothing was ever brought to me as in we want to fight, because I've been talking to UFC.
Nothing was ever brought to Volkanovski as they were going to fight. I know there was a lot of circling of words by Volkanovski, and it took him over a minute to get out that the answer is no. There wasn't a fight offered for him against Ilia Topuria. There wasn't a 305 Perth main event laid out, and now Topuria said, no, I'm not doing it. He preferred not to fight Volkanovski in enemy territory, which I think the champion coming off of a vicious knockout win, in a sense, is going to have some say. And I actually think that Ilia Topuria has a right to be like, no, I'm not fighting you in enemy territory. I do think champions should have slightly more say. Like imagine, you have a fighter from the Middle East, or maybe a Muslim fighter from Dagestan, and now Topuria has to go fight them in enemy territory, similar to what we saw with Charles Oliveira having to fight Makhachev in enemy territory. I would prefer someone say, no, you fight me on my grounds. It's my world title. I have some say here. Now, normally, the UFC uses the fighters as pawns. Obviously, the biggest monopoly in the game, the UFC has full control in a sense. But fighters saying no, are they just going to strip Topuria? If hypothetically he did say no to that, which he did not. This was disproven. But I wouldn't blame Ilia Topuria for saying, I'm not fighting you in Australia. I want to fight you on my turf or in neutral ground. As a champion, I think you have somewhat of a right and stake to hold claim to what you desire as far as your title defenses. Volkanovski just disproved Rogan and Daniel Cormier in a matter of a minute. There was no fight offer. These statements are untrue. Either Rogan made assumptions from Topuria's interview, or he got some fake inside information about the claim. Now, we can look here at Ilia Topuria, where he discussed a potential fight against Max Holloway. We can quickly watch this clip here.
De pelear por el título, ¿qué vas a hacer? ¿Vas a pelear o no vas a pelear?
So it's all in Spanish. But what he's saying here is about the fight against Max Holloway. He wants it to be for the BMF belt, which you can see this like little quotes here. You, Max, are the champion. You have the opportunity to fight for the title. What are you going to do? And are you to fight, or are you not going to fight? He says, sign the contract. Where are you? Where are you? Put the BMF belt in the game. You want me to come and put this belt on the table, and you don't want to put yours on the table? I can't really hate the mentality. I mean, I've said this is the issue with the BMF title going into a lineal title matchup, because now you're going to have two belts on the line. And let's say now Ilia Topuria knocks out Holloway, or Holloway beats Topuria. Regardless, now the BMF belt is entrapped with the UFC world title, and they become, in a sense, one of the same, but without the weight class mandatory rule for a title defense for the featherweight belt. So potentially going up, you could defend the BMF belt, but then what? You're going to stall the weight class below? An issue then would lie is, okay, so who do we consider not to be a BMF? Let's use an example of a name. Let's use Movsar Evloev as a name. Is he not a guy that would get a BMF shot? So let's say Topuria has the world title and the BMF belt, but now Movsar fights, beats him, and doesn't get the BMF with the win, and Topuria is still the BMF champ, or Holloway's still the BMF champ. This is where it can become delusionalville with this BMF title. This is why I push for it being a separate entity a lot of the time. Either you're putting it on the line, and it is what it is every damn time, or the BMF title would be something that wouldn't be used in a matchup like this, because the BMF champion is not going to get a shot at the undisputed champion. But, oh, that limits fight opportunities and options. I agree. But that's kind of the only way we can eliminate the gimmick side of the BMF belt, is making it an entirely separate thing. Now, don't be fooled by the lies. Ilia Topuria is more than willing and is very much interested in a fight against Max Holloway. And in this interview, I'm not even going to play the clip because it's all in Spanish. He said he'd be willing to fight Brian Ortega. And he mentioned Ortega's a good fight because of the danger he put Volkanovski in. But it's not that he isn't willing to fight the other opposition. It's just about the stipulations at play that Max Holloway not wanting to put the BMF belt on the line have kind of made Topuria say, okay, I'll fight somebody else. And Volkanovski's timeline doesn't seem optimal for Topuria's next fight. I'll assume that Ilia Topuria is going to be fighting sometime, maybe late in the summer. Volk doesn't want to fight till towards the winter. There's no duck here. These claims were all false. And I got to stand for Ilia Topuria a bit. Now, Topuria went to Twitter and dropped a banger tweet. This was yesterday. He said, I never turned down the rematch with Alex, says the UFC has never offered me this fight. As I've said many times before, I will be the first to knock out Holloway. Let's keep this simple. Do you want to fight? If the answer is yes, there is nothing more to discuss. Bring my belt and your pillow. Savage call. Max Holloway replied to this. He said, bro, you're the one making this hard. Enough already, LOL. I'll bring your belt. The bitching motherfucker, laughing face. All you are doing is putting words together now. You're spiraling. So obviously Max Holloway is more than down to take on Ilia Topuria, and I think it's an absolutely sick matchup. Just depends. So Topuria is saying, yes, I'm fighting Holloway. Now, is this him backtracking on the claims that he wants the BMF title also on the line? I will say probably not. I think he wants that BMF strap on the line too, but that's where the waters get murky and things could get weird. So I will tell you this. I don't believe there is going to be a Holloway-Topuria fight set until the outcome of McGregor versus Chandler. Now, I know a lot of people will say, man, McGregor's washed. He's past his best days. He's going to lose to Chandler. Let's say McGregor isn't fully washed, beats Michael Chandler. Does a BMF title fight between Max Holloway and Conor McGregor in a rematch not do insane numbers and become one of the biggest UFC pay-per-views ever? It's great for business. And I personally have an inkling that it could line up for Conor McGregor BMF title attempt against Max Holloway if he's victorious, obviously, against Michael Chandler. And personally, I really want to see that fight. Not that I don't love the fight between Topuria and Max Holloway, but I would prefer to see Max Holloway, who's put so much time into developing a real lightweight frame, stay at 155 pounds, or even, if you're fighting Conor McGregor, maybe willing to fight upwards of 170 pounds against him for a BMF defense where weight really won't matter. I'd be down for it. And I'm curious what you guys are thinking. What do you want to see next for Ilia Topuria? I feel like the masses will lean towards the fight against Max Holloway. But let's be honest here. There is a ton of potential buzz and an insane amount of pay-per-view buy opportunities if Max Holloway is instead going to be fighting against Conor McGregor, which I think is a possibility. Guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you learned something from this video too. Unfortunately, Joe Rogan is not the most trusted name in MMA news, especially not in this current era. I think you hear something from his podcast, you take it as absolute as a fight fan, where it's just simply untrue. And it did kind of stain, at least for a week or so, the image of Ilia Topuria, because I saw plenty of people tweeting that he's Ilia Topuria and kind of pulling away from their interest in him. I still think Topuria is a savage, and how could you not be excited for more fights from him? So I'm glad to be out here standing with Topuria, disproving the fake news. I do think we'll see a Volkanovski rematch at some point, but I would much prefer to see it at the end of this year, or damn, even early 2025, to give Volk as much rest as he needs. I'm down for the Ortega fight. If Max Holloway ends up fighting Conor McGregor, fine. I know he's got some unfinished business with Ilia Topuria because they've kind of had some back and forth through social media. But if a McGregor fight shows itself, I believe that will be the card chosen by the UFC and Max Holloway. Thank you guys for tuning in. Let me know what you thought in the comments down below. I appreciate you all for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace out, my people.